When you think of Magnavox, I bet you think of DVD players, TVs perhaps, but chances are good you're not thinking about computers, even though Magnavox, as a subsidiary of Phillips, did produce a few under that name brand in the 80s and into the early 90s. And that includes this fine specimen here, this 386 SX-20. And like the other computers in the series that I'm doing here, I'm trying to put together the computer the way that it would have been as you would buy it off the shelf back in the day. And I think I've mostly done that here. The monitor goes with the computer. I know that the keyboard, probably, it is a Phillips keyboard. So it's about the right age, AT keyboard, and then a little more iffy on the peripherals. The speakers and mouse, these are basically just generic, but they're from about that time period. I don't even know if there was a Magnavox mouse, for example. And the speakers probably you would have bought aftermarket. It doesn't look like they actually would have come with this particular system, but perhaps you could have paid a little more and had some speakers included. I really don't know for certain. But yeah, I really like the aesthetics of this computer. I don't have a whole lot of 386 systems because batteries leak and power supplies die and so forth. So it's kind of in that zone where the computers, the ones that are still remaining, are starting to have all kinds of problems and needing restoration work and so forth. But I haven't really done anything with this particular computer. I bought it off of Craigslist, as it turns out. Someone was liquidating their computer collection, and even though I got there kind of late, I was able to grab this system for a very reasonable price. So I'm quite happy about that. And so today I thought we'd just, do the usual thing and maybe load a couple programs. I was thinking SimCity, which came out in the late 80s, would work just fine on this computer. So I'll get that loaded and try to play that a little bit. And then, of course, take a look at the inside and what's going on there. Now, I can't tell you, this system would have shipped with a whole 40 megabyte hard drive, so that seems completely crazy to us today, I know, but that's what it would have had, along with a 4 megabytes of RAM. So kind of typical for sort of early 90s computer. And actually, in terms of price, as you'll see in this ad that I was able to find in one of my catalogs from that time period, even though I think that is the 16 megahertz version, is very, very similar to this one, would have been very cost competitive at $1,000 at the time, which probably converts to about twice that much, maybe $2,000 today. But and that sounds like a lot, but it, compared to its competitors, Magnavox actually had a very competitive system in this Max Station 20 megahertz computer here. And this would have been actually one of the last computers that I know about that Philips Magnavox would have released to the home market. I know they had a few other computer products, after this one in the early 90s, but I do believe this was the last one targeted at the home market, this personal computer here. So, all right, guys, let's load a couple things, turn it on, and then a little later after that, open up the case and show you around the inside. Alright, this is SimCity Classic, the 1993 release. And I've done a little bit of troubleshooting, and I know that why the mouse doesn't work because there's a mouse driver loaded, but the sound for whatever reason doesn't seem to work. Going into settings and everything, it shows that the sound card is there and it recognizes it. Yet on SimCity and a number of other programs, it's simply not working. And I've tried other speakers as well, so I'm really kind of bummed out about that. So I think what we'll do is I'll load the original version of SimCity and let it run off of the PC speaker, so at least we'll have some kind of sound, even though the quality of the sound's not nearly as good as running off that sound card and using these speakers. Alright, so at least now we've got some sound. I actually don't know if the sound effects are going to work in this game, but at least the music is playing through the PC speaker now. Alright, start a new city. Also, the mouse is working because I loaded the drivers, so yay, mouse. One thing I can tell you is that I have actually successfully played SimCity with the sound working before on this computer a while back, and the performance was pretty bad. It was pretty sluggish with SimCity Classic, and it's amazing the performance boost that you get by switching over to the PC speaker rather than using the sound card. You know what we're going to put here. Fartville. Yeah. Pay homage to LGR. And it still runs a little sluggish, but what you can do is turn off animate all, and you can actually turn off frequent animation as well, and that'll let it run a little faster. You can disable, you can actually slow it down a little bit. All of those things will enhance performance. So we don't actually have sound effects, which sucks a lot. I gotta tell you that just running the sound through the computer speakers really kind of wears on you after a while. And of course there's like no way to turn it down. You turn it off. That's preferable, actually, I think, at this point. But so it's really kind of disappointing. I don't know what happened, because again it looks like it sees the card there. Even if you go through settings on SimCity and choose Sound Blaster, it does just fine. It says that it's there, it's configured, it's ready to go. I don't know if we'll see anything when I open up the case here in a minute, but can look at the sound card and see if somehow it jostled out of place or something. I really don't have a good explanation for it, because it looks like all the drivers are loaded and everything. But anyway, other than the sound not working properly, SimCity runs really pretty smooth if you just have limited sound and kind of turn down the animations on this 20 megahertz 386. And of course, this game, the classic version was released in '93, and 46s were the computer of choice at that point, and runs beautifully on a 486 system. Maybe 50 megahertz, 33, 50 megahertz system will run this without any problems at all. Alright, let's take a look at the inside. Maybe be able to see something with that sound card, but I kind of doubt it. Okay, before I take the top of the case off, there's just a couple things I wanted to point out in the back and the sides of the case. And here in back, in order to get the top of the case off, just have a couple screws. It's really kind of easy compared to some other vintage cases take these screws out, these two on the top, and that's one of those that just lifts up and then forward, and should come right off anyway. So we've got, you can see here, we've got the sound card down here, the sound card that's given me so much trouble. We'll take a closer look at it once I get the top off. And then you've got your serial and parallel ports down here, VGA over here on the side. And I can't quite see it, but we've got a joystick card in there, which is kind of neat. Yeah, there's not really that much to see on the back, just kind of standard stuff, and there's obviously room for additional cards, but it's kind of nice that it comes with that sound card, even though it doesn't seem to be working properly right now, and that joystick card, so it's kind of semi-multimedia ready. Now, I also want to point out on the side of the case here that it wasn't that unusual, but a lot of cases did require you to bring your keyboard cord all the way back to the back of the case in order to connect it. You're with your AT slot here, and with this one, it's on the side, which I always appreciated and preferred having that port on the side rather than the back, so you don't have to, if you're replacing the keyboard or moving things around, you don't have to reach all the way to the back of the computer to make that exchange. And it's really kind of useful when you've got really heavy cases like this that you don't want to move around. Plus, you probably have the monitor, your CRT monitor, sitting on top of it, so it's not really something that you can easily move around. So it's always kind of nice to have that feature, have that port on the side. All right, so let's take the top off here. Okay, so here we've got a little more of a bird's eye view, and you can see, the main motherboard tucked away down here. And it's kind of interesting because you've got the separate card here with the Phillips logo that actually has the CPU. So this is the 386, the Intel 386 processor. I assume this here is actually a slot for a coprocessor. So if I'm wrong about that, certainly let me know in the comments, but I believe that's what that's there for. Got the riser card here for expansion cards, and again, got this pretty nice joystick card in here, the Game Card 3 automatic. Haven't seen this exact card before, but it's got tons of capacitors and resistors. I always enjoy seeing these old components on these older cards. Just something you don't really see anymore. But underneath that, yeah, it's that sound card, the Windows sound system card, which I understand wasn't really that uncommon during this period from about 1990 up until maybe the mid-1990s, and had some Sound Blaster compatibility. I know Sound Blaster Pro, it had some compatibility there, and it was actually working a few months ago when I booted this up, and I don't know what happened because the card and everything seems to be in the right place, and I've reinstalled the Windows Sound System drivers, both in Windows 3.1 and with the DOS compatibility with Sound Blaster enabled, and it's still not working. So yeah, I'm thinking maybe the card died, which is kind of unusual and unfortunate, but that's maybe what happened. So I think probably what I'll try to do is replace that card with just a Sound Blaster, probably Sound Blaster Pro or Sound Blaster 16, and should work just fine as a DOS Windows 3.1 computer. Then I actually really like this computer. It's my favorite 386 system that I own, and so I want to get it back into operating state. And that's probably what I'll end up doing, because again, loading the drivers didn't work, and I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but the chances are at this point that it's just a bad card. So if you have any ideas, again, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to address that. So what else here? So everything else I think is pretty standard. You got your RAM hiding under here, that 4 megabyte stick, your floppy drive, and there is actually, I'll turn this around, there is space in here. So you got your hard drive down in here. There is space for either another floppy drive, which is probably likely that this expansion was primarily for a second floppy drive. You could stick one down here, or potentially a second hard drive as well. So on top of this hard drive down here, you actually do have enough space for either a second hard drive or a second floppy drive. Probably what they had in mind is a second floppy drive underneath here for copying disk and so forth. That was pretty common still at that period of time. And of course your 5.25-inch drive here looks to be in really good shape still, and there is space under that as well. I'm thinking if you really wanted to, a CD-ROM drive could be inserted down there. I don't know honestly how well a CD-ROM drive would work on this 386 system. It's not really a multimedia system. That's one of the things that I wanted to mention that I kind of forgot about, that being from about 1992 or so, this computer would have been like right before the multimedia explosion. So doesn't have a CD-ROM drive, but you probably could install one, a slower one. I don't know how well it would do, CD-ROMs and so forth. I mean, it's just at 20 megahertz is not a very powerful system, but I think it is doable. In fact, I should probably experiment and try it sometime, but wasn't really thought of as a multimedia system, and those really didn't explode onto the scene until about 1993, 1994. That multimedia became really big, so we're not that far away from that time period. So we're not really that far away from that time period. Thankfully, the power supply does still work, standard AT power supply and connections down there. So I don't know, I think that's about all I wanted to point out. It is a little dusty, and it's a little unfortunate that sound card doesn't seem to work anymore and has problems. But otherwise, I think the system is in great shape, and I'm quite happy with the find. And if I do get that sound working with the Sound Blaster card or something like that, I will make another video of everything up and running and probably run a few games on it, just kind of showcase what a 20 megahertz 386 processor can do, which is not a whole lot, but it actually had really good compatibility, with a wide assortment of DOS games that you would have been able to run on, say, the original IBM or XT AT systems. So that's kind of nice. And this does not have a turbo button. I assume 20 megahertz is slow enough to emulate the 4.77 megahertz on the original systems, IBM systems, that you didn't need a turbo button. I suppose it's slow enough, but definitely have to get the sound working and load some more games and so forth, and come back, revisit this system here in the future. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you like this kind of old stuff where I'm going through and trying to put together complete systems, really, these vintage computers, consider subscribing, coming back, and I should have, within this series, a new computer to showcase maybe every couple of weeks, certainly once every 3 or 4 weeks at the very least, a whole system to show off. So, all right, guys, as always, thank you very much for watching, and catch you next time.